So yes, I am so happy to be here. Happy to talk about this book. Haven't done a whole lot of talks like this for this book. I mean, I talk about it in my class all the time, but one of the few invites I've had. You know, the book is. We'll talk about the how the book is doing, which, you know, to me it doesn't really matter. But this is a big state, and it is has more species than more species of diurnal raptors and other raptors than any other state in the union. For those of you from Alaska in the crowd, when we start writing about how big Texas is, they'll tell us that, you know, Alaskans would cut the state in half and make us the third largest state. If you think of a state as big as Alaska would have that many more birds, but you don't have the geographic position that we do. So let's just get into this. So I start with this image here, and I'm fairly certain that most people haven't. I think this was, but I was as surprised as maybe some of you who saw this, thinking, is that this? We got this image just sort of happenstance. Somebody sent it to us, me and my co-author, and we had no idea. But this turns out as Gotcha. Well, I got a picture of him though. Yeah, can everybody hear me? I am sort of soft spoken.
Yeah, better.
So here we go. Yeah, so this is not the actual cover. This is a mock-up that they sent us. Well, it actually came via Amazon. We had no idea this was going to be a mock-up, but it turned out to be a mock-up. This is the actual cover, and it took a while to get it. This state, we wanted to feature some of the drawings in the book. You know, first-time authors, I had no idea what I was doing. So trying to go with flow, and this is right before the pandemic. Actually submitted it, and the pandemic hit, so things just sort of logged on for a while. So I'm going to talk about this book for sure, and it covers a lot of material. If you have a chance to look through it, this covers. It's in the realm of, you know, the old school natural history treatments. And that's kind of what we were hoping to do, is write something that would appeal to readers and, you know, like images. So that's how we started with this. It was a 10-year project. Supposed to be a 2-year contract, and ended up being 12 years worth of hard work. Other people probably would have done it in a weekend, but we didn't. So this is my co-author, Clint Boal, who is an active raptor biologist working in the field a lot. I don't get to do that much anymore now that I'm teaching, but he's in the field a lot, and so he's a great raptor biologist. Glad to have him on my side. This is the first comprehensive treatment like this for Texas raptors of any kind, but especially the diurnal raptors, which are several orders now. It used to be just one. Here's the cover again. So we have preliminary chapters. If you haven't looked at this, there's introduction, there's a raptors collected from Texas. We'll talk about that for a second. Conservation chapter, where we delve into things like, you know, what things are harming and doing good for raptors. There's a lot of stuff there. Morphology and physiology. So some of this is just basic textbook material, ecology, behavior, and migration for raptors in general. Then raptor evolution in general and taxonomy, more generally, but focused on raptors. And then this section on Texas natural regions, which took a turn right about the time we were developing this book, going away from the old Gould and LBJ School of Public Affairs ecoregions and into the new that Parks and Wildlife has advocated. And so this took some effort getting those natural regions up to snuff for everybody to do about it. Features that, so the natural histories then cover 38 species, which 29 regular occurring and 9 accidentals. So we have total right now it's actually 40 species of diurnal raptors in Texas, which again more than any other state in the country. Decent bragging rights. Range maps were developed for all the species, and a brand new style of range map that we wanted to use, which included as a base the new ecoregion mapping system, ecoregion. So we use those as a base, and then overlaid that with breeding, wintering, migration, and spotting, accidental migration, that sort of thing. Photographs of all the species, which we had to borrow from generous people. This is a much harder thing to do than I ever thought it would be. And then original art for this. One of my driving factors for doing this work was to get some art out. I really wanted to draw these birds. I'm a lifelong artist, and so in addition to biology, so I wanted to do this as a vehicle for these birds to show people what these things look like. And spent a lot of time trying to get personalities built into these birds, because they all have them. I know these birds very well in the field, and they all have their own little gestalt. Everybody's familiar with that word. And so they have their own personalities, they really do. So I tried to capture that with the drawing. That's part of the reason it took so long. Tables, appendices, literature, over almost 600 publications were cited here, so it took a lot of work. We tried to use all of the most recent data from all of the Texas research that's been going on. This worked out about 350 pages. Would have been a lot more, but we got cut back, of course, by our, which is fine, with a lot of stuff. So it is on sale, very cheap. I mean, surprisingly cheap. And they're getting cheaper and cheaper. So you'll get your copy now. Original artwork. So let's blow through this quickly. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time if you've seen the book already, but vultures, we have the black vulture, turkey vulture, osprey. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because I do have a lot of stuff here. Osprey, and these are from reference photos that I borrowed from people and sometimes Photoshop them together to get the angle that I wanted. Graphite pencil on just archival paper. So I could have used color, but my specialty is black and white. I really get a feeling that comes through with graphite that doesn't really exist with colors. Mississippi kite, tall-tailed kite, hook-billed kite, white-tailed kite. Then we have more of these in this order of typical forms. Except today, we got, of course, the bald eagle, Cooper's hawk, sharp-shinned hawk, golden eagle, northern terrier, Broadway hawk. More hawks, we've got hawk, red shoulder, gray hawk, red tail, common black, and my personal favorite, white tail. This is what I worked on for my dissertation. And more hawks. Rough-legged, winter visitor here, a rare. Brutish hawk, which nests in the northeast part of the state. We've got a Swain's hawk, nice migratory bird. These birds that have names for people, we know that they're going to be changing. We'll talk later about what some of these ideas might be for this bird and others. And there's zone-tailed hawks. There are falcons, of course. You've got the Gerda falcon, the merlin, Apamato, American kestrel, which I worked on for my master's, the caracara, and caracara. So that's the sum total of the regularly occurring species. And they all got full chapter treatments. The accidentals, which have been growing by the year, it seems like, got a shorter treatment. It's sort of like 2 paragraphs. Okay, so what I want to do is pull out a few things from the book, talk about those. There's way more than we could possibly cover in an hour, 45 minutes. But I thought I'd start with the collection from Texas chapter, which was a lot of fun to do. I worked at the American Museum of Natural History, and this is one of the best museums in the world if you ever get a chance to go. New York, it is got over 1 million skins, and for raptors, especially collected from Texas, there's no equal. Maybe the Field Museum in Chicago is supposed to be in the Smithsonian, but this is an amazing museum. So I went through all of the internet portals that are available for the museum, which fortunately were pretty well developed. The ones I couldn't get data for I went to directly, so I spent a lot of time trying to ferret out everything I could about where these might be thousand. You know, so this is one of the tables, and showing the number of specimens, the types of specimens collected over the years, and you see really the heyday of collecting. Do I have a light here? Yes. Yeah. So that's really the heyday of collecting is right here about the turn of the century, late 19th century, early 20th century. That's where most people were out there collecting, and most of this is eggs, because that was huge back then. Zoology and skins. And then we have some bones and others, a whole bunch of other things, film, nests, and all kinds of things. So that sort of tapered off as the decades wore on. This is what I thought was pretty interesting. If you took Texas and tallied up all of the raptors collected from all of the counties and put them in sum totals for each county, here's the range of specimens collected here from 0 in white to over 200, so 250 in dark red. You see where the bulk of the collection took place. Pretty much close to Bend and way down near Brownsville. Those counties, there are four or five counties where most of the collection took place. And my guess is this is because these reports, these were easily accessible. You know, back in the day, trying to travel across land took a while. The boat was the major source of transportation. And so people come in here and set up shop, and there's a lot of debate for some of these collectors as to where they actually collect these raptors. I won't get into that at this point, but I know some colleagues that are fairly certain that some of these collectors were just pulling birds out of Mexico and labeling them being collected in Texas. So there was a lot of competition for who could collect the most birds back then and doing it. So you take the five most collected birds for the most heavily collected counties. Those are all in the valley, Lower Rio Grande Valley, Cameron, Nueces, Refugio, and Calhoun. You see the layout here. So these are the most heavily collected birds for each of the most heavily collected counties. Right. So these 4 counties comprise the bulk, over half, roughly half of the collections in Texas. Right. So these are the ranked collections of birds, of raptors, for each of those counties. So you see in each case, we have the same species showing up as the most often collected bird. Why that is, I do not know. I mean, it could be that their eggs were very popular. They're a showy bird. They're pretty handsome, interesting looking creature. I don't know why there's so many characters represented here. Mono falcons are second, and this is the source of problem. I have a good friend of mine, Dean Kitty Hector, who's done a lot of work with Osmatos, questioning some of these collections as coming actually from Texas, but nonetheless, there it is. There's hawk, white-tailed, duck vulture, and you see the scattering of different species. County you're in, but overall, it's a lot of the same species over and over again. Are they easier to collect them? Okay, so I had to keep my arm here at the argument, John, but I thought I would just do it again. I was surprised to learn that we were going to be chosen for this award. I didn't actually go to the meeting, sadly, but my co-author did. I didn't even know we had won until a student, the class I was teaching this last spring, came up and showed me a screenshot that she took on her phone. They said, "Hey, is this your book?" I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, yes." And this is the I asked for the PowerPoint slide that she took a screenshot of. This is what they showed at the meeting, and wow, I mean, I was just blown away. You know, besides we were beside ourselves, Clint and I both. He was there, and he actually they gave him this nice little trophy, which he kept. I'd like to see it someday, but so he's got that, and I've got a screenshot. It's all good.
In 6 months, he should get it 6
Right.
months.
So, yeah, I was very happy that we got this. I wasn't expecting it really, and did it help our sales? No. It did help. So it's one of those pound back things for that. We all heard. Okay, so we're going to get into Texas Raptors, but some of the professorial personality in me comes out when it comes to meetings like this. There are a lot of things about raptors that I'm sure you are aware of that fascinate you and drive you to raptors. And what we try to do in this book is gather a lot of information, share that, and show you why, what is it about these birds? It's hard to answer. I think it's a fairly individual response that people have. But I think to sum it all up, something about this fear of an animal that we can't quite understand, we can't quite come to terms with. We know it's smaller than us. I mean, these birds weigh maybe 2 pounds, good sized hawk, but we're afraid of them, And so, what is it about these things? So we venerate them, but we also vilify them, which really is a sad thing. So I thought I'd start this little discussion with this image. Anybody recognize that? Hurricane. Which one?
Probably.
Harvey. Before there was COVID, there was Hurricane Harvey, which was a severe storm, right? It's only category 4. Came in, blew in. We saw it coming across the Gulf. It looked like this. We were ready. Imagine people in Acapulco that go to Cat 5, 165 mile an hour. Don't want to talk about that. But this is a Cat 4. It arrived on Texas coast and became the wettest tropical cyclone ever for the United States, with intense flooding. I had friends that were in Houston and Galveston trying to get out. It was pretty bad. We had gas shortages, etc. $125 million in damage. So this is a huge storm. That's just subtext. Basically, what happens with storms like this is birds get blown around, as you well aware, right? So this is a photograph. This appeared in our local station, NBC station, KXAN. Thank you very much. And this little guy showed up in the backseat of a cab. You recognize this bird, maybe it's genus. Look at that long middle toe.
And shoulders.
Long middle toe. Disproportionately long. This is an accipiter. Yeah. They have a really long middle toe, right? So there's juvenile coopers. There's that long middle toe. And it was dubbed Harvey the Hawk, right?
Harvey the Hawk.
Storm that blew it in. All right. Well, this is what I wanted to show. This is, I think, gets to the heart of, this guy, this is the cab driver, the actual cab driver of this cab, pulled this bird out and had it on his hand, on a glove, fortunately. And actually did pretty well. I mean, most people would just be scared the second one would go. He wasn't, but what I wanted to look at, and what I have my students look at is, look at that, look at his eyes. Look at what is he seeing, and what is that bird seeing? So, I mean, you could probably name it several emotions coming out of this man's face, his soul, right? I see it as fascination and fear, a little different one. The bird here is like, this is juvenile, and he's got his wings down, he's like staring off the distance. He probably doesn't know what's happening. Most adults or juveniles don't face that many predators on their of them. They obviously don't want to be handled, don't want to be taken advantage of. But this guy, I think, certainly look at that and go, oh, this is fun. So he's saying, wow, it's so cool. Man, I'm so amazed where the bird is from. Not so happy. Let me at you,
Is he holding his feet or is he just perched on his hand?
It's perched on his hand. I'm not sure how well it is. He does have a glove on, and so he may have a wrap. I'm not that sure how he did this. This is actually kind of impressive. He may have had skill.
Or is that a broken wing?
I think the wing was broken.
Probably a shot.
So I think bird got let go, or these things are a little hit, I'm not sure. So we venerate raptors, right? they go way back to kind of the Egyptian gods. We have evidence, 2,500 BCE, the sun god Ra, and the Horus god of the sky. These are developed after actual raptors in their local areas. So there's been this attention paid to them for forever. These are just one of many, many examples. We also vilify them, which we'll be talking about, fortunately. So where does this appear? These raptor symbols appear in all kinds of countries. Codes of coat of arms or codes that they use for their national symbol. So we've got the protector deity in Hinduism is the Brahmani kite, is the physical manifestation of the Brahman, is a spiritual, highest spiritual form in Hinduism. The Brahmani kite is named the Brahmani kite. This is assumed to be the physical manifestation of this spirit. So this is veneration to the highest degree. Right? We have national symbols elsewhere: Romania, Serbia, Austria, Iraq, Mexico, right? Golden eagle. And there's debate there about the bird actually is. I've got my opinions, but say that for another time. U.S., of course, and then we've got tribes of native peoples who have looked at raptors and had amazing stories and mythologies centered around them. So it's been with us forever in that context. The question that bothered me from the beginning of this book was, what exactly is a raptor? Okay, I mean, yes, kind of have a general idea, but how would you define it? Why is it called a raptor? What is a raptor, right? So all these questions started coming to me as I was writing the introduction, just the first chapter. In 2009, 2010, I was writing this stupid introduction. It took months and months and months. And I literally got on this kick about what is a raptor and got so deep into it that Clint just said, you should just pull this out and make it, do a separate paper on it. Yeah, I just was too fascinated. So the term raptor is got an interesting history. I want to go into that just briefly because it fascinates me. I'm sorry if I'm being self-indulgent, but it's a fun topic, I believe. We associate with birds of prey. Bird of prey is another term, which seems to be a more widely used term throughout other cultures. Instead of calling it a raptor, they call it bird of prey, or in Mandarin and in Arabic, it's the bird that cuts. So there are different approaches to this. English uses raptor. Why is that? So typical 15th century descriptions have a crooked bill and long talons. That's the sign. Bird of prey. 8th century BCE, Homer, in the 13th book in the Iliad, a hawk, swift of flight, speedeth forth to fly. Okay, go with that. In the Odyssey, circling hawk, the swiftest of winged things. All right. Doesn't help a lot, but it's partially descriptive. Pliny says birds which have hooked talons are never gregarious. They have long wings, or large wings, a small body. All these descriptors that, if somebody's to stop in the street and say, tell me what a raptor is, having to go through all this, would take a while, right? But what's interesting here is the term raptor doesn't show up in any of these old writings. So where did this come from? Well, if you want to, take a place to start is with the dictionary, Webster in this case. Raptorial talks about raptorial, what raptorial means. So something that is described what a raptor might be. This being predaceous, preying on other animals, adept at seizing prey, with all these marvelous adaptations. It's somewhat circularly of or relating to being a bird of prey. All right, so we know that hook beak, talons, which some examples are just as massive as some of the most massive mammalian predators. But harp eagle hallux, the rear talon of the harp eagle, is about 4 inches long, which is every bit as big and menacing as a grizzly bear's claw. And, you know, is outweighed by hundreds of pounds. So what is it about these birds? Why can't something like a cassowary be called a raptor? It can slice you open with one kick. That claw right there disembowels people, and that's what it's used for. It's defense. It kicks and disembowels. It could be a predator, but it's not. So there's things that we are curious about with the understanding of what a raptor really is. So I got really curious, and I ended up pulling all that information out and wrote a paper. Just going to do this and get it done. I had to park the book for a year and write this paper to be published. So this is the commentary letter in Journal of Raptor Research, and it's about basically what I found out about the evolution of this term, raptor. I'm going to give you the highlights. It gets deeper than this, but basically, where do you begin with this? So the first thing I did, most people would do, is type the internet. With the internet, you type in raptor, right? What would you get? What do you think you would get?
Car or a video game.
Toronto.
If you did that right now, that's pretty much what you would find. This is what a raptor is in modern culture, right? Could be a basketball team, right? Maybe it could be it's a fossil. There's the actual red tail hawk, which appeared several pages down. I mean, you could do this, you know, I can't remember when I did this, but anytime you do this, you're going to get, until the Ford Raptor goes out of existence, this will be the most popular search item. So what is it? Why is this term suddenly co-opted by all of these? Oh. Okay. So what is the raptor? What is this? This is what was driving me nuts. Then I discovered this little jewel of a piece of software. Any of you are bird ears like I am out there? This is a tremendous little tool. It's called Google Ngram Viewer. Just type it in Google, you get Ngram Viewer, and it will spit out, it catalogs, it has access to all the digitized copies of all the books out there that has been digitized into all kinds of languages. So this is a fascinating tool. So you basically type in whatever terms you want. I use bird of prey and raptor in lowercase, and asked it to look for all the books written predominantly in English. They're predominantly in English, so it captured everything that might be English. Case insensitive, any country between 1800 and 2019, which is pretty much the range span of data even today. This is accessed in 2023, August of this year, for my class. So I wanted to refresh. So here's a trajectory. This is raptor in blue. This is bird of prey in red. You see, bird of prey starts off pretty high. These are percentages, and won't worry about how tiny they are. We just talk about the relative distance between, right? So there's the trajectory for bird of prey. Here's raptor sleeping along, and all of a sudden it takes a big bounce. This is very interesting. Something is going on here. There's something about this term that suddenly got people excited. What was it? All right, well, cutting to a little bit of the chase and steam, a little bit of thunder out of some of this talk, we'll go right to the fact that in 1828, a poet named James Jennings turns out to be the first person to introduce that term raptor as it's spelled into English as a synonym for bird of prey. Okay. OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, plus their nerdy souls, has their own opinion, which I can see what they're doing, but none of their entries really qualify as a synonym for bird of prey. It's maybe the term raptor that appeared the first time for this, that, and the other, but in none of those instances was it actually a term meant to be synonymous with bird of prey. Anyway, so there's 1828, James Jennings, no register. In fact, bird of prey got even more popular. So nobody's caught on here. Raptors there, but it's still sleeping. Right, the next blip I point out is right here with the appearance of Velociraptor mongoliensis, which everybody is familiar with. Now that the Velociraptor, everybody knows about the Velociraptor. So this is the first time that a fossil has used this term raptor. First of the raptor fossils named raptor. Now there's a lot of other fossils named raptor which are much older than Velociraptor mongoliensis. So this is the first one. This is one that gets it started. And so again, not a little bit of a blip, but not much. But probably much all the nerdy paleontologists. And then Rachel Carson's 1962. It's out in spring. And she may not have used, maybe didn't use the term raptors that much in her book. But raptors suddenly became something on people's consciousness, right? It's in their awareness. And I'm just conjecture here, but I think that you know, raptors suddenly became a little bit more dominant in the vernacular of everyday life, and it actually surpassed birds of prey, right? In the 70s, environmental movement, right? That decade. So this is on the way up. Okay, then it took another sharp turn. It was starting to go up and up and up, and then right here it took off. What might this be? I was at the American Museum when they were filming this, and I remember they shutting everything down and bringing all the film crews. It was amazing. Prior to 1993, when it came out, they were looking at this. But when this movie comes out, right? So then everybody learns about Velociraptor. That's when things really took off for this term, and as evidenced by Google's Ngram viewers. After that, we have raptors everywhere. Toronto Raptors, 1995, F-22 Raptor, one of the most magnificent feats of aerodynamic engineering ever, 1997. But then it's everywhere now. Proteins, cartoons, software, it's everywhere. It's been unleashed. All right, so why? What is it? So do people really know where raptor comes from? This is my continuing dilemma. Don't you know where raptor comes from? Why are you using it for these terms? All right, so this is what kept me up at night, kept me talking about this. Before I get into the OED, I think it's worth pointing out that other people have had the same struggle I had. This is McClure's paper that came out in 2019, went out in 2017. And I just talked about the evolution of the term itself, not trying to define what a raptor should be, which I thought was probably a waste of time. He took a step further and tried to use phylogeny as a way to do this, which, you know, is just a way of reconstructing hypothesis for reconstructing evolutionary history. This is it for birds. There's some major bird orders, and he's saying that raptors should be in this gray box, right? Mainly because these are all raptorial. Look outside the box, they're not so raptorial. But this is the major groups of birds that are raptorial. So he's saying just draw a box around this group and call them all raptors. All right, because they're all so similar in terms of what they're doing. All species of the orders they evolved from raptorial land bird lineage, in most cases, maintain the raptorial lifestyle and derive from a common ancestor. So it's true that with modern molecular systematics shown that the major clades and major natural groups of birds all have at their base a raptorial species of system. So they kind of laid the groundwork for the evolution of the rest of the birds in their lineages. Right? So they're all raptorial first, which is kind of interesting. So all these birds are raptorial. They're all either at the base of the clade or on their own, with their own clade of their own. So this is what he's saying. If we do this, though, if you've already scanned this group of birds here, you've noticed falcons, newer vultures, the foxes, harriers, and kites and so forth, the owls. So there's this group.
That's very honest, they didn't.
Yeah. You can shrug your shoulder and go, yeah, ecological counterpart to a secretary bird. Secretary birds are in their own family as a bona fide raptor. Why can't we call their image raptors, or why shouldn't we? And so he's saying basically, if we do it this way, then this should definitely be a raptor, right? Red-legged Sariema, there's two species. This is a more common one. They look like secretary birds and act like them. Right, so, but we don't call them raptors yet. And there's actually some group of people that want to kick the dark forms out to raptors, because they don't really have some of the raptorial tendencies, traits that define other raptors. Double claws, vision is good, and they have really good acute sense of smell, which makes them pretty different than other raptors. But you know, just drawing the box around there is probably a nice way to start. But the problem is with us, all of us are, and he's a biologist too, and he knows this, and I'm not sure anybody's up there. Good response, so hopefully he's not watching. But if I would like to know how you evade the problem of paraphyly. So paraphyly is a term that fancy term that we use in phylogenetics. It says if you have a group, in this case this gray box, that does not contain all the descendant taxa, all right, so it doesn't. Here's this group of taxa, but what about these guys? These are descendants from the common ancestors that gave rise to these. There's these, and there's some down here that are yields, kingfishers. These are not included in that box. So when you have a group that's constructed like this, we have a name for it. A paraphyletic group, which is not a natural group. A good monophyletic natural group should have common ancestor and all its descendants. This is not like it. This gray box is not satisfied monophyly, so we're gonna go. Okay, nice idea, but we'll have to wrestle with that. In the end, and I think in this is the paper, defining a raptor takes some effort. I mean, it does. How do you define it? How do you define the bird that should be a raptor? That still wasn't what my paper was about. I want to know where this thinking term comes from. Why do we call it raptor? What is a raptor? What is it? All right, so in Latin, it's Latin, you might imagine. It's a masculine noun. And this is part of my deep dive. The root for this term, rap, is actually a term that descends from way back in the European languages. The hypothesized constructs of this term, this root, which in linguistics is called lexeme, like memes. This is a lexeme. And so rap is a lexeme that is hypothesized to have come from Proto-Indo-European. And we're talking 8,000 years ago at least. All right, so then what? So this rap is actually, it's constructed of laryngeal sounds, which I'm not going to bother to even try to imitate. H1 rep is what rap comes from. These are linguistic terms, which again, I cannot, forgive me if I don't try to utter those, but this is what it was. It's hypothesized to be back in the day. In those days, it is thought to have meant, and I don't know how they did this, but take the word for it, snatch and pluck. So simply rap was snatching and plucking. That relates to what raptors do, right? Okay, but then you might think, oh, no, why would these birds get, how many other predators out there snatch and pluck? Why is it that birds are called raptors? Still the mystery I was trying to solve. So it goes to PIE, proto-italic, then italic, then Latin. So here you can't see all these languages. So here are all the descendant languages that come from Proto-Indo-European way down here. All right, there's proto-italic, there's italic, and then it gets into Latin. ultimately into English, and this is the fun thing. How did it get into English? None of these cases is a bird. I'll go ahead and say that right now. In none of these cases, at this point, is this a bird. This is a behavior, snatching and plucking. Right? This is not a bird. The term used to reference what birds do. Certain birds do, and lots of other birds do. All right, so OED, the highly vaulted, vaunted source, the gold standard for where you go for understanding origins of English words, right? So here's the three entries. Number one, plunderer, now obsolete, from 1398. Secondly, ravisher, rapist, abductor, now rare, from 1592. Third is A, bird of prey, Simpsony present, and B is Dromaeosauridae, dinosaur. So Dromaeosauridae is a family that includes velociraptors. There's also some other species in that family. But not all the raptors are in Dromaeosauridae. There is a bunch of other families in the big tree that is the theropod dinosaurs. So let's go through this and probably run out of time. 7:30. Now we got time. The first appearance, Middle English. It says plunderer, robber from 1398. Well, this is from a pre-encyclopedia type of writing on the existence of everything that was known at the time, translated by John Trevisa, which you may not have known about. He's a contemporary of Chaucer and was one of the few people, two or three, and he introduced probably as many words into English as Chaucer did into Middle English. This translation is 1398. Okay, so he translated then, and he translates Middle English from Latin and uses this line right here. This is the line that the OED points to say this is the first appearance as plunderer or robber. Okay, that's fair. Raptor, which is the old French ending, not the Latin that we use in the US. This is not a synonym for birds of prey. No way is this a synonym. This is merely a behavior. Okay. Raptor, probably been used in the RAPTO sense in Latin for a long time, or that plunderer or robber. So that makes sense. Use that as a way to define what's going on in the Trevisa translation. Again, it's not a bird of prey, okay? Secondly, ravisher, rapist, abductor, 1592 present. Okay, so here's the line of these. Stygian raptor, those prayers lightly regarding yada yada. Still not a synonym. This is Stygian raptor. Okay, so we know there's a Stygian owl. We need to talk about that right away. That's not what they're talking about. So Stygian versus the river Styx, or raptor in this sense, actually plucking, probably from Hades, is going across the river Styx. Right. So this is what this is referencing. Not a bird of prey. So raptor, it turns out, is not a bird anywhere. In all this research I could do, I found it nowhere. I mean, I obviously am not trained to exhaustively comb through every piece of work that ever existed that may have term record, but I searched far and wide, and there's just a pattern that seemed to point to the fact that there's no bird associated with raptor anywhere during this period. So in classical Latin, in poetry, church writings, jurisprudence, they all have the same general meaning, which descends from the H1 rap high root, right? The ravisher, abductor, and in many cases rapist, RAP, that root, is taking in one. And it's fair to say, and some of the English scholars may disagree. I would welcome the debate, but I think it's fair to say that in some of these early writings, rapist may not have been applied to the sexual malevolent act. It may have been just the idea of plucking, eating. Here's an example right in. So the writings in these authors, Ovid, Virgil, Cicero, Quintilian, Claudian, they all reference this kind of behavior, which of course is referring to us now, right? But I think it may be fair to say, and again, this is an uneducated guess, that in many cases may not be exactly what was meant. This example right here, the rape was for peanut, by Claudian. Pluto goes into the underworld and brings back Proserpina. And it said that he raped her. I don't want to get into this, get maybe off into waters I don't want to tread, but I think there's some equivocation in here. Again, scholars might disagree, and I would take that wholeheartedly. But I think the stemming from the actual root of the term, snatching and plucking, this is a forced betrothal, basically, by Pluto. He's doing now and stealing this woman, snatching and plucking her from the figure to the underworld. Right? Now, maybe that's not only what he did. I don't know. I can't speak to that. But I think there's some justification for saying that snatching and plucking was involved, and that's the kind of rap-based term that may define some of these instances here. So please correct me if I'm wrong. But this stemming from this pattern, you automatically get a feeling that this term is largely relegated to those acts of taking, thievery, plundering, robbing, and yes, in some cases, raping. Whatever that term might be. None of this is a bird, right? I mean, birds can do this. Birds can do these things, but so do other animals, other predators. Why is it that these birds are called raptor? I didn't really find the answer to that in the book or in my search. Entry 3 tells us this is where bird of prey comes into being. As raptor is bird of prey, 1783. This is what I was really interested in. Okay, well, this will get us somewhere. That this finally is the entry point for bird of prey becoming raptor. Raptor is becoming bird of prey. B is the Diurnal that we'll talk about. So 1783, what's this? Virgil's Aeneid. And here's the translation by Green, 1783. That's the date that they're giving, right? Yes, it uses the term raptor in this line. And you don't have to read it, but if you do, it's talking about with the first fair gale, snatch the prey and spread the flying sails. Behavior, right? Not saying this is a bird doing this, it's sort of a metaphor maybe for a bird-like behavior. It says raptor and prey in the same stanza, but what does this really mean? What do they mean by raptor? Okay, 1783. 1783, the term raptor is already around and is already being used, descended from all the classical writing, as we just mentioned. Okay, so what I wanted to know is, okay, maybe he took it from the actual Latin. So raptor, I'm using raptor here because that's what was written in the original Latin. I had no idea how to find this. I listened to the help of Dr. Todd Krause of the Center for Linguistic Studies in University of Texas. One of these genius guys who has a PhD in physics or something and dabbles in linguistics. He knows 8 languages and 2 of them are extinct. You know, this kind of person. So I asked him, I said, can you help me find the original Latin for this word of this quotation that was translated by Green? So he actually went to the library and found it. And here's the passage right here in Latin, the actual Latin, the original Latin that was used. Raptor does not appear in these lines. These are the lines that were translated to this. Raptor appears here, but not here. What is going on? Use the term raptor. Where did it come from? Well, obviously he's a learned scholar, probably knew what raptor was, already had some idea of what raptor meant. And took it upon himself with poetic license to include that in the translation. Is this bird of prey? Tenuous, maybe, biblical, arguable, not solid, right? So far, none of these entries in OED mean bird of prey. They reference behaviors, but nothing in bird of prey. No mention there. So the conclusion basically now, 1783, the reference is not a bird of prey. Again, just a metaphor. So we're not getting very far. Turns out, and this is not even mentioned in the OED, that there's a much more likely way that raptor became synonymous with birds of prey. It had to come through the first taxonomy, which was based in Latin, and then remixed, if you will, by a poet. So a couple of early taxonomists, Illiger and Biggers here. Illiger is up with this term raptoris, which is turns out a very cumbersome, more or less inappropriate use of that term in its configuration, and so a lot of people didn't take this up. That was Illiger. So Biggers comes along later and says raptoris is unusual, we're going to change it, and he talks about instead calling it raptoris. Correction. Calls it raptoris as the order for birds of prey. This is what considered for many decades was raptoris. Raptoris is also in the Latin Vulgate, translated in the 4th century from the Greek, used as the Roman Catholic Church Bible, right? See, in Luke 18:11, or I can't see, sorry, talking about the Pharisees, etc., in Latin, talking about raptoris. So what does that mean? Well, that raptoris is actually used in the sense of robbers. So still, there is no bird of prey association here. Raptoris hung on as an order for a long time. It's actually even talked about. It wouldn't apply to classic translation of Emperor Frederick II's story, the Art of Falconry. There's no raptoris in there, and no bird of prey as raptor. So along comes this poet, James Jennings, 1828. He is an ornithologist, is not very well regarded, more or less a poet, really. And he sees this term, raptoris, but even that one is a little bit too cumbersome. He decides he wants to put it in anglicized dress. So he writes this little definitive line right here. Thus of the 5 classes of the raptoris might be raptors. Notice how he separates those two syllables, rap from probably the root, and puts an apostrophe there. In a poem appended to this same treatment, he says, in a poem he says, the tall growliter and the raptor appears. With a footnote, it says, raptor with apostrophe drop, defining it as a rapacious bird. He defines raptor as a rapacious bird. This is significant. Finally, raptor has the meaning of bird. Not anywhere in the OED. So, be that as it may. Contrary to OED, much more likely at the beginning of the term raptor in English as bird of prey was through taxonomy and through gender. So that was the upshot of my paper, finally getting somewhere that I felt comfortable saying, okay, where did this term raptor come from? What's left are the questions relating to why these birds are called raptors. Okay, quickly, 3B is about the Dromaeosaurus dinosaurs, Hollywood's version of which turns out to be somewhat hilarious. So that is not the size of a velociraptor. That's a velociraptor. All right. So this model was probably Deinonychus. It could have been Utah raptor, probably Utah raptor right here, which is one of the largest of the raptors. Right, so that's sure. Use that as a- So, in a nutshell, if you wanted a diagram of all this, well, OED 1 and 2, OED 3A and 3B. Right, so 3A would take us through Latin into taxonomy, then into poetry, where the modern English equivalent here in this poem. That's the upshot of this thing. I didn't want to define what raptor was in terms of how which bird should be a raptor. That was a losing battle. At least I feel better now, knowing where this term comes from. I still don't know why these animals have to be the ones called raptors. Why can't wolves be called raptors? Or bears? Or other carnivores? No. When I said earlier that raptors vilified, what kind of a term would you apply to an animal if you wanted to vilify? Maybe something like raptor, which has the connotation of rape. Horrible, malevolent action. Very bad behavior. It's already stigmatized. So raptors carry the stigma. Do we have time for all this? I have a lot of general stuff on general biology stuff on raptors. We maybe I'm just asking if we have enough time for some of this. We kind of going.
10 minutes.
Okay, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let me skip through some of this and go to the Texas Raptors when we do a little quiz show on this. We'll just go through this quickly. I'm happy to leave this PowerPoint with you if that's something.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah. Which, unfortunately, raptor vision, of course, is highly evolved and way ahead of everything else. Their eyes are constructed in ways that make them see better at all levels, deeper tubular shaped eyeballs, which do more surface area, allows a bigger image to be laid down. They have more photoreceptors. They have more photoreceptor connections per ganglion. They have faster twitch muscles in their irises. They have dual phobias, which allow them to see monocular and monocular vision. And nictitating membranes, which protect their eyes from damage, of course. And this is an interesting one. Boodio, common buzzard. We have 20/20 vision, they have 25. Probably because they have 1 million photoreceptors per millimeter square, whereas humans only have maximum 200,000. They just have way more of everything. They just see in ways that we can't even begin to see. Okay. Again, that's all just so much stuff here. This is their hearing. The hearing is actually pretty cool too. They hear better than other birds. So, Elmine kites and harriers and owls share the property of asymmetrical ear sizes and openings. Sense of smell. Turkey vultures have a great sense of smell, but it turns out other birds do too. So this is hard. Yes, I do like raptors, and I love sharing my knowledge about raptors, but I don't want to, take up too much of your time. So here's the list, and now if we get any more speaking, I'm not going to be able to show it on PowerPoint. This is the full set. Right, so this is where it comes down to. We have 2 turkey vultures, we have 2 world vultures, 2 world vultures, 2 to the 7, 1 family Cathartidae. We've got Osprey and its own family, used to be a subfamily. We've got all these raptors in Accipitridae. Then we've got Falconidae. So this used to be 1 order Falconiforms. Now it's 1, 2, 3 orders. All right. This is the list. These 4 species were added fairly recently. 2012, 2018. The one in 2012, 2018 made it in the book. The 2021 pair did not. The book took 3 years to get published, so they came in and done their nose as the book was languishing publishers. So regular occurring species are still 29. Accidentals are 11, and this is a group of birds that is seen only once or twice every 10 years, right? So let's see some hawks. Here's the full set. What I'm going to do is go through this whole list. So just put them all up here. I'm going to go through them quickly. You can imagine in your mind, say, they try to identify them, okay? Raptors are hard, but some raptors are fairly easy. I'll give the first one away, zone tail. What's the one to the right? We go left to right. Just blur them out as we go. Red tail, yes. White tail, yes. Hoopers, yes.
Sharpie.
Sharpshin. Football. Next one. Red shoulder. Lower left. Is it tough? Right next to it, Rufus thighs and then Whitemore.
Ferruginous.
Ferruginous, good. Harris hawk next to that on the right. It's hard to tell if you can see the head. American goshawk, you see northern goshawk, right? Just American is the Eurasian. Also changed species names, no longer gentilis, now it's Atrocaphlus. Krista Caracara, what's the one to the right of that? Very good, yeah. Easy. That one to the right, give away black vulture. Lower left, all the way down, right here, this one. The accidentals, it's the most numerous accidental short-tailed hawk. What about this one? It's black cummerbund, Altomato. This one right here. It's a difficult way to see it. Yeah, I should say it close up. These aren't really big enough. Bald eagle, of course. Next to that, see in the base of the wings. See for
Crescent.
See once in Texas.
Green.
This one right here, that's a crane hawk. Yeah, they have an interesting convergence with harrier hawks from Africa that tend to get legs backwards. The double jointed convergence, they're not related. Crane hawk, what about this? Quickly wrist, osprey. Next to that one, male, female are different. For the harrier. This is another accidental. I wouldn't go tell
These are all South Texas.
yeah, and this one, sciences, yes. This one's another accidental. First, only once seen in Texas. Horse falcon, or other turkey vulture. Yes, right, very good. They're in my class.
That's great about.
The falcon.
Those were broadman hawks. Deer falcon, good. What about this one?
Been a gyre falcon in Texas.
Yes, one juvenile in Lubbock. Yeah, this is a splayed outer tail feather, which no other species will show in the place. This is like big, huge bird, flat wing.
Goldie.
Yeah, gold eagle. This one,
One black.
black hawk, very good. Here's black armpits. Falcon, long tail, very good. There's 5 records. Fifth one was last summer in Lake Somerville. Okay.
Snail kite.
This one's on the swallowtail. This one. Battle wings. Track that terrestrial snails. Texas.
Hookbill.
Hookbill. And then some
Broadway.
mixed in terrestrial right here. So, Broadwing is over here. Gonna be right parallel, looks kind of similar, but Greyhawk is pitched in the tables there.
Yeah.
And the last one,
Yes.
Kestrel. Okay, that's not actually the last of this whole list. Let's go along quickly. The accidentals. All right, so there's 11 now. There was only 9 not too long ago. Here's the 11. Stellars and that dog the most recent.
Where was Stellar State?
At Clodo Creek State Park.
Where?
Clodo Creek.
Lotto?
Clodo Creek.
Lotto.
Yeah.
Where's that?
It's in Victoria County, I think. Yeah. Well, I have more data on this. So let's get to those. Those are both new in 2021. Similar season was seen once, one day. I think it was seen repeatedly, but it's just one individual. We'll do a story on that one. That dog was seen a bunch of times from December into March of 2022. Probably the same. All right, let's look at some of these because it's always fun to track these things down. 5 records for snowflakes. This is from our book. This is where they're found. This had 4 because the 5th one hadn't been seen yet. So that's the first record. Here's the record from 2022, another juvenile. Crane hawk, 1 record. Looked like this is the photograph that accepted it. Just the 1 bird. Roadside hawk. I was fortunate to be down with my class in 2018. We saw the 10 observations of this bird in Texas. It was a juvenile. The first observation here was an adult, but juveniles often here from far away. So that's the roadside hawk. Short-tailed hawk is the most numerous. There are 68 records now in both morphs across the state. American goshawk used to be northern. There's tons of records for those two. It's scattered across the state. Most people think of it as just up in the Canadian breaks, but really it's been seen, documented all over. Called forest falcon at one time was a white morph adult. Jur falcon is that one time was seen at a water tower in January of 2002. All right, double-toothed kite showed up in 2011. The story here is pretty interesting. I've got a second to talk about this because it's just so amazing. So this is what happens. Read through it if you want. On 3 May 2011, woman they cleaned Renta. Do you know her? I could correspond with her a lot because this is a real story. She was down there and she had a little pics and icon and just looking away and looking at pictures. And she likes lizards. So she was taking photographs of lizards, and she saw this one bird come along and start eating a lizard. And she photographed it and went home and filed it under her folder of Cooper's hawk because she didn't know what it was. Right. This is the photograph of one of them. She took 21 photos that day. That kind of looks like a Cooper's, maybe. You know. David Hansen came back the next day and took this photograph and some other ones. So she came on the 3rd, he came on the 4th. This photo was the one that formed the record as the first appearance of this species in Texas and the US, right? But in 2014, Colette and her husband are going through, they're actually going through Boy Scout woods again. And they're running into somebody who tells them about a bird that was photographed in May of 2011 that turned out to be a very rare bird. And I don't think they didn't get all of the details on that, but she came back that day and found that it was actually her photo. I think that she's been given credit as the first one. Okay, we have Great Black Hawk, which has a kind of sad story too. It's a juvenile. It actually ended up in Maine. Stayed around there for a while, hung out, got really cold, and then sadly it died of frostbite probably. This is what happens. So more recent arrivals in Stellar's sea eagle, which some people don't exactly buy as an actual record, but it's nonetheless been accepted, and that document is not too surprising. Okay, I guess we can stop there. I've got some more things on migration and Hawkwatch. Go to the Corpus Christi Hawkwatch. Hawkwatch is just the most the highest count of raptors in the nation. Every year there's this one like over 1 million birds already seen. Sorry about going over, but thank you again for inviting me.